Hi, I'm Rick Crawford. Since I became aware of the Forrest Fenn treasure in 2012, I've always maintained that I knew the general location of the treasure. And since someone was foolish enough to announce a treasure was found, yet failed to give any immediate details and left everyone hanging, but since all is fair in love and war, and all things Forrest Fenn indulgence, the 11th commandment says, and I quote, "The hesitant shall lose the glory of discovery if they announce manifest destiny of indulgence without further details, and leaveth the poor in heart," I mean pockets, awaiting judgment. Interpreting that from the Greek and the Hebrew, if you didn't take Forrest's advice and plan this thing out, you leave yourself wide open for someone else to pee on your campfire. And so, here's some damp smoke in your face, so-called Christopher Fenn Columbus. Within 2 hours of hearing about the Forrest Fenn treasure from a post on the internet in 2012, I had discovered the general location of the Forrest Fenn treasure. And I know there's a lot of people that will find that unbelievable. Now, I have a high IQ. The $1.99 IQ test I took from the Pakistani website said that I had 170 IQ. I was a little upset at first because I thought it said 107, but then when I looked closer, I'm a little dyslexic sometimes, I realized it said 170. So I immediately applied to Mensa, but for some reason they must be real busy because they haven't got back to me with my application results. So anyway, to show you how smart I am, the way I discovered the location, the general location, the big location, was when I read about the treasure, I read the poem, did some research. I read the poem and I took Forrest at his word that all the information was in the poem, and I did a Google search. I put all the key words from the poem, all the key words that I thought were key in the poem, into a one-line continuous Google search that went something like this: warm waters, comma, canyon down, comma, not far, comma, too far to walk, comma, home of brown, comma, meek, comma, up your creek, comma, heavy loads, comma, waters high, comma, wise, comma, blaze, marvel gaze, comma, worth the cold, comma, brave, in the wood, comma, gold, comma, treasures bold, comma, riches, comma, new and old, comma. In other words, I used AI, artificial intelligence, before I even knew what AI was. I just knew Google had all the answers, and so I plugged everything in there, and after the wheel turned for a few minutes in my old computer, up popped a page. Right at the top of the page, in all the list of all those keywords, was a page about Pagosa Springs, Colorado. It talked about the old trail up the East Fork to Elwood Pass and the gold mining that went on back in the day. There were photos of the hot springs at Pagosa, jeeps crossing high water crossings where the road crossed over streams, old mine photos of the Black Diamond Mine, once called the Elwood. My wife pointed out, when I gave her my discovery, she said, Elwood, she knows Spanish a lot better than I do, she says, Elwood means the wood in Spanish. Elwood in Spanish means the wood. There's also a story about the mining town of Elwood that was washed away in a flood. There were glossy photos of waterfalls, people fly fishing, and a history about a famous trip made by a woman named Brown from the Elwood camp in the dead of winter to Pagosa Springs. There was a blaze tree, an old aspen, with the inscription, Elwood Pass, that has been there for over 80 years. Bingo, I had my starting place, a place to look and start and look some more and look some more and look some more. 9 years worth of trips. I started in the early summer of 2013. When I headed up the East Fork, there was still 2-foot snow drifts. My old 4-wheel drive truck groaned and churned up the roads and over the boulders and rocks and across high water. And I had taken a good friend with me who is also a treasure hunter, who belongs to a group. He also has a famous, or a website that's pretty well known. It's called tuscoro.com. That's TUSCORO.com. Dan Lowe, he's a good friend of mine. He was with me on that first trip. We crawled through the snow drifts and hiked through the snow drifts up as far as we could go. I parked at the junction where Elwood Creek meets Crayton Creek and becomes the headwaters of the East Fork of the San Juan River. And I parked there, and Dan, who was smarter than me, waited in the truck for several hours while I climbed through the snow drifts in my cowboy boots, over logs. You know, when you're going through snow drifts, you don't know where all the logs are laying under the snow, and you end up with a stub right in your shins or falling in a hole. I waded through the icy cold, waist-deep water of Crayton Creek in late May, early June, somewhere in that time. Hiked up to the old Black Diamond mine, which was the historical Elwood mine, the old city of Elwood. Peeked in the mines, some of the mine holes. Saw that the mines had collapsed, and because one of the clues that I figured, Forrest said, I have gone alone in there. And then he also mentions a hint of riches new and old. I figured Forrest might have hid the treasure in an old mine. I have gone alone in there, and a hint of riches new and old. I figured the old hint of riches was the old mine, and the new hint of riches was his treasure. And when I saw some of the entrances were collapsed, I was disappointed, cold, a little bit discouraged, but exhilarated by my experience, and I staggered back to the truck with cowboy boots full of water and slushy snow. When I got about 100 yards from the truck, I could see Dan sleeping with my binoculars. And so I looked around and found a large 50-pound squarish rock, and I kind of put it under my coat and staggered down the trail. And when I got about 50 feet from the truck, I started yelling at Dan, Dan, I found it, Dan, I found it. Dan got out of the truck in a stupor, tripped over a rock, fell down and hurt his leg, jumped up like a kid in a candy store on Christmas Day. And then when I dropped the rock at his feet, he about killed me. Anyway, then we got in the truck and talked for a while, and at that time I put on fresh socks and my hiking boots, which in my excitement to get out and look, I forgot to put on. And we drove back to Pagosa and spent the night, ate at a restaurant, and went to the art gallery there in Pagosa, the old, I'm going to forget the name of the artist, the famous museum right there. I'll mention it a little bit later when I show my pictures. It'll pop into my head. And then the next day we went home. That was my starting point, and with one exception, every time I've gone back to look for the Forrest Fenn treasure, I've gone to that general location. All the clues are there. I'm going to show you subsequently how every clue in the poem and every clue that Forrest has ever given, the clue that I believe is in the book, in the map, and all the other clues that anybody can come up with or imagine are all right there in this area. And indeed, I do believe I finally figured out the last clue that would have led me to the treasure. And Monday, tomorrow, my father and I were leaving to go to Pagosa Springs, up the East Fork of the San Juan, up to this old town site of Elwood, to the top of the blaze, and to a tree to recover the treasure, where I believe it is. I might not be from Texas, but I'm from Utah, Forrest. I almost walked up and picked up your treasure, but I think somebody else beat me to it. Anyway, I've got trail cameras out. I'm looking forward to going and picking up anyway to see who's on there and to see if this indeed was where the treasure was. Now, it's possible that my location is wrong. It's possible that there are multiple areas in the Rocky Mountains in the search area that meet almost all the criteria of the Forrest Fenn poem. It's possible that I've misinterpreted some of the things, or that Forrest has interpreted them differently. But one of the things that has me convinced that I figured it out was I have so much in common with Forrest Fenn that it's almost astonishing. And I'm going to list those things now just to let you know that I feel like I see things in some of the same light as Forrest because of my background. My father was a school teacher. My father was in the administration. He was also a math and history teacher. He was an outstanding baseball player. He was a baseball coach. So before my camera went dead, I was talking about some of the similarities that I have in common with Forrest Fenn. And I mentioned my father was a high school math teacher. I enjoyed fishing, fly fishing particularly. We went on spring, summer breaks to Yellowstone as a family. I'm a military veteran. I married my high school sweetheart, have two daughters, two beautiful daughters. I studied anthropology at Northern Arizona University, and I love the native history and people. I love the native art and petroglyphs. I study the ancient petroglyphs and artwork in the canyons. Rock art, some people call it, but I really believe it was a written language. I run a YouTube channel called, that's Napa Research, Native American Petroglyph and Archaeological Association. I have been on many archaeological digs, official ones with universities, mind you. I am a poet and have written many poems and have two anthologies, Sovereign Winds and Soul of Stone. I've written other books. Some of them can be found on Amazon. I once killed a mountain lion and later regretted killing that magnificent animal. I love art and old trinkets, and I have found several treasures. I roped a wild animal once. It wasn't a buffalo, but it was just as bad, and I have witnesses. My sister once made me walk a long ways before I got a ride. She passed away earlier this year, and I love and miss her a lot. I'm nostalgic. I love history, good quotes, wisdom, and common sense. When I read Fenn's poem, I just knew the type of place Fenn would go to die and cast himself over its treasure. It would look like the medicine man's grave I once found while surveying many years ago It overlooked a spectacular expanse of rugged mountains and canyons. The sound of waterfalls and rushing streams echoed up from the canyons below. Brooding storm clouds, sudden summer storms, deep snow, majestic views that you could see far into the distance. I saw rugged peaks and mountains and a sovereign wind that always blew and reminded me of this creation, this God's creation. I could see in my mind's eye just the type of place that Forrest Fenn would go to die. And when I arrived there in my search, I was not disappointed. And I felt in my soul that I had arrived. Now, many of you may also have many things in common with Mr. Fenn, and I think that's what endears him to so many of us. So you can comment in spaces below what endears Forrest Fenn to you and the things that you have in common with him. I would appreciate and like to hear about that. Now I'm going to go on my desktop here and I'm going to pull up all the clues from the poem and the clues, the additional clues that Forrest Fenn gave in his media interviews and in his many postings and his comments on different websites, and show you how all these clues fit in this area that I have been searching. Forrest's poem says, "As I have gone alone in there, and with my treasures bold, I can keep a secret where, a hint of riches new and old, and hint of riches new and old. Begin it where warm waters halt, and take it in the canyon down, not far, but too far to walk, put in below the home of Brown. From there is no place for the meek, from there it's no place for the meek. The end is ever drawing nigh, there'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and waters high. If you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down your quest to cease, but tarry scant with marvel gaze, just take the chest and go in peace. So why is it that I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? The answer I already know, I've done it tired and now I'm weak. So hear me all and listen good, your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold." In my quest for the Forrest Fenn treasure, I always thought that the first clue, I have gone alone in there, and with my treasure bold, I can keep my secret where, a hint of riches new and old. I always felt like a hint of riches new and old was a mining district, an area where great treasure, particularly gold, silver, had come from before, and would be in an area where Forrest put his treasure, would be the hint of riches, new, his treasure, and old, the old mining district, the old mine. Now initially I thought that he had put it in an old mine. I have gone alone in there, so I assumed he had put it in an old mine or an old mine shaft. Although as subsequent clues and some searchers making some foolish decisions, we quickly got a clue, I believe it was in 2013 or 14, that it wasn't in a mine or a cave. And I think that was to protect people and protect mines, private mines, as well as possible hazards of climbing into an old mine shaft. So once he clarified that, then I shortened my idea to just be an old mining district, an area where treasure, gold, silver had once existed, may even exist to this day, and it was an area where he put his treasure in modern times. The second stanza of the poem, begin at where warm waters halt. I always felt that Forrest's treasure would not be too far from Santa Fe. Some of his clues that he gave, that he left in the day, early in the day, or left and he got back before Peggy had known he was gone, only left two realistic clues, or two realistic possibilities. One was he jumped in his airplane and flew to a location, rented a car, and drove to the location and hid his treasure in 2 trips. Looking at the logistics of all that, just put Yellowstone out of the scope in my view of logic, my logical view. Just put Yellowstone out of the scope of being able to get on a plane, fly to an area, rent a car, drive to a location, hike, and get back and fly back home and get back to Peggy before she really knew he was gone. So my view of that was it was a short Jeep drive away from Forrest Fenn's home. And when I did my AI search, my artificial intelligence Google search, and came up with Pagosa Springs and the warm springs where the water is taken in the canyon down, I figured not far, but too far to walk from Pagosa Springs would be the beginning of the quest. But right there, before, above the turnoff to the East Fork of the San Juan River, is a historical cabin that was owned by a famous Brown, who was also an art collector. And I believe, it's my belief, that Mr. Fenn knew of this Brown, this art collector, through his dealings with artwork in this old Santa Fe trading post. I also believe that Forrest may have frequented a couple of the art galleries in Pagosa Springs. And it's only a short couple-hour drive from Santa Fe to Pagosa Springs, Colorado. From there it's no place for the meek. Indeed, the East Fork of the San Juan, the road going up to the pass, is a rough, steep, rocky, frequented by deep water crossings, spectacular views, drop-offs on the side of the narrow, rough roads. And the end is ever drawing nigh as you go up the road. You're getting closer to the treasure. There'll be no paddle up your creek. The reason there's no paddle up your creek, because you're driving up the road beside the San Juan River. Just heavy loads and waters high. Indeed, most of the year, Forrest couldn't have found a better place for hiding a treasure, because most of the year it's protected by deep, high water crossings. Cold water that comes right out of the glaciers and peaks of Treasure Mountain and Crater Creek and Elwood Creek and all those high passes. Del Norte is not too far away from there. All those mountain peaks, melting waters throughout most of the year, snow falling through several months of the year, and only some years only a month or two when you can even get up to this area. In fact, two of my trips were stopped, one by snow, deep snow, early snow, and once by water that was too high, too dangerous for me to get across. Just heavy loads and waters high. The heavy loads, there's two or three things that loads could be a clue to. Could be the actual physical load of Forrest carrying the treasure, or you carrying the treasure back. It could also be the heavy mineral load-bearing streams of the San Juan River and its tributaries. Load-bearing water is a mining term used by miners and treasure hunters. If you have been wise and found the blaze, Now this one obviously has stumped many people. It stumped me for a long time. I looked and looked and looked until one day when I was looking at Google Earth, I found a literal blaze, the old mountain man shaped blaze on Google Earth. It was a large rock slide that was in the shape of a blaze. The two lines that the old mountain men and the trappers and the traders and the pioneers, before that the Indians and Native Americans, used to mark trails. The two circles, one above and one below in direct line, or one above and one below to the right, and one above and one below to the left, which means either go right or go left. In this case, I found a huge blaze mark on the ground that looked like a spectacular blaze in multicolored rock. And to me, I felt like this was the blaze, or one of the blazes, because one of Forrest's subsequent clues was that it could be a blaze on a rock, could be a blaze on a tree, it could be a forest fire, or it could be all of the above. And indeed, in this area, there's an old forest fire blaze, there's a large blaze on a tree, and there's the large blaze mark in the rocks on the mountainside that would last forever, or until there was a major geological event. And if you've been wise and found the blaze, wise was a clue that always baffled me for a long time, because I knew it was a clue. I felt like it was an important clue. And with my dad, as my dad was kind of the inspiration behind wise, Forrest helped in that clue when he said a child is more likely to find it than an adult. My dad said one day, he said, well, it's going to be down in a little place where kids would go and play or hide, or it's going to be up in a tree. And from there it was an easy jump to owls are wise, they live in trees, and so subsequently we started searching in and around trees. One of the search areas near the blaze, below the blaze, is what I term or call the gnome garden. It's a little group of trees that's got ferns and little trees growing up in deadfall, and it's just like a little maze of trees and cubby holes and rocks. And we searched that area for 2 or 3 days. I had my metal detector in there and a probe, and we were looking all over in the trees and on the ground and all around that area. And we didn't find it. I did find a spot where somebody had moved a rock out of the way and there was a hole in the ground. And so maybe that's where it was, but I don't think so. I think that was just a bear rolled a rock over to get some ants or something like that. But if you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down your quest to cease. Now quickly means closely. Look shortly down. So the treasure chest is going to be close to the blaze. Look quickly down. And one of the clues that I've come up with is you can't look down unless you are up. And so, in my view, I started later in the search, I started thinking that the treasure was above or up high in the blaze or above the blaze. And so we did a couple of searches above this area. But tarry scant with marble gaze. To me, this confirms my idea that the location that Fenn would choose for his final resting place was a marvelous gazing location, a place with spectacular views, streams, roaring waterfalls, soaring clouds, mountain peaks, valleys, trees, beautiful vegetation, insects, birds, the smells of the forest, wild animals, and many of the things that Forrest explained in his book in so many words, his nostalgia and his appreciation for nature. And this area indeed has all these things. spectacular canyons, waterfalls. It's the headwaters of where the Crater Creek and Elwood Creek meet and form the East Fork of the San Juan River. It's the location of the town, old town of Elwood, that was washed away. Elwood, in the wood, the wood. Elwood is the wood in Spanish. Tarry scant with marble gaze. I knew scant had to mean something because it's an unusual word to put where it is, and yeah, it fits the poem. It has a meaning of don't tarry very long. Scant means little, less. However, I knew there had to be more to it than just that. And in my research and experiences in construction, I knew that that was an old English term for rocks. Scant is a small rock. Indeed, what I finally termed to be the large rock blaze in the mountainside was an entire hill of probably 10 acres of boulders from the size of a doghouse down to the size of a basketball, all covered with lichen of green and orange and brown and yellow. And the rocks are full of quartz and mica and fossils and seams of metallic shimmering colors. It's a very beautiful rock, but it's like a maze. It's like a needle in the haystack. And so when I discovered what I termed to be the blaze, or one of the blazes, I discovered that this giant rock pile is like a Where's Waldo. It's the perfect place for Forrest Fenn to walk out into the middle of the rocks and put his treasure down into a hole or a crevice that would be in plain sight if you were standing 12 or 15 feet away or in the right sunlight or had your flashlight and were looking down in the right hole. It would also be a place that you could, there were also places in those rocks and boulders where you could cast yourself onto the treasure and your bones would molder down into the rocks and only a buzzard or a crow flying above would look down upon your bones unless there was some poor lost soul in the middle of the night trying to get back to his car and stumbled across the lava pile and tripped over one of your bones. There'd be hardly any way anybody would ever find that location. So I spent 2 days with my metal detector going over every location, taking Forrest at his word that said don't go where an 80-year-old man wouldn't go. Now I realize that that's kind of a oxymoron, because obviously Forrest Fenn went there when he was almost 80, and so you could either say, well, he wasn't 80 when he went there, so that's why he said don't go where an 80-year-old man wouldn't go, because he wasn't 80, or don't go where an 80-year-old man would go as a trick clue, because obviously Fenn was crazy enough to go almost anywhere. You know, he gave us that information in his book when they shot the mountain lion and climbed down a pine tree off the cliff. You know, Forrest went to some crazy places and did a fearlessness about him. Anybody that's a fighter pilot in Vietnam was shot down and did some of the things that he did obviously had nerves of steel. But tarry scant with marvel gaze, just take the chest and go in peace. So a place, I believe, is a place where you could bring peace to your soul. And indeed, when you're in the nature and God's creation, it's the temple in the wilderness. That's where the soul and the body and the spirit are all revived. There's much peace. So why is it that I must go and leave my trove for all to seek? The answers I already know. I've done it tired and now I'm weak. Now this stanza, I really haven't come up with any clues. Maybe somebody else out there has. You could leave in the comments below. But he's asking a question. Why did he do this? And maybe that's the clue. And the clue was that because this represents Forrest Fenn. Why did he do it? Because this best represents Forrest Fenn and his attitudes and behaviors and the things he likes and the culmination of his life experience. So hear me all and listen good. Your effort will be worth the cold. So listen to all his clues. Listen good and pay attention to the details. Your effort will be worth the cold. Indeed, I've never gone to this area that I was not cold during the adventure, even in the middle of summer in late August. I always got wet. I was always tired. When I got back to the truck, I was weak. Your effort will be worth the cold. The river crossing, the final river crossing, most people are going to have to wade across either Crayton Creek or Elwood Creek and to get over into this area and find the treasure. If your effort will be worth the cold. If you are brave and in the wood. Now, people have said, well, what does brave and in the wood mean? Well, Forrest was a brave soul. And even though he said, don't go where an 80-year-old man wouldn't go, you can always say, but go where Forrest Fenn would go. Forrest was brave, and he said in the woods. So either in the woods, in something with the name of wood, as I believe Elwood, the wood, indicates, but it could also mean, as I mentioned earlier, with if you were wise and found the blaze. Wise as an owl, owls live in trees. Perhaps being brave was up in a tree, in a spectacular location, in the wood, up in the tree. You're in the woods, you're in the wood, you're in Elwood. I have found every one of Forrest's clues in the poem to have a triple meaning. And I might go into that a little detail or in another video, I don't have time here. But every one of Forrest's clues in his poem had a triple meaning. Just as Forrest said, the blaze could be three things. It could be a blaze in a tree, a blaze on the hillside, a forest fire, or it could be all three. It was indeed all three. There's a blaze from the forest fire, there's a blaze on the hillside in the rocks, and there's a blaze in the tree. If you're brave and in the wood, I give you title to the gold. Well, why did he say title to the gold? Well, because I believe, as he has said and indicated and given clues all along, even though the treasure is going to be there, there's going to be a final piece that's going to let Forrest know that you found the treasure. There's going to be something that requires a title, whether it's cashing a check against his estate, whether it's some other means or method that he will know. There's a little note, in history, a letter, there's a way he will know that you found the treasure. And that's the title part. Now those are just the clues that I've come up with in the poem. Maybe you have more, maybe you can add to this, maybe this gives you some ideas. I'd appreciate it if you comment below and share your thoughts about that. Now I'm going to go on to the internet here, and I'm going to pull up from one of the sites a list, one of the sites that has a real good list of all the clues. And then I'm going to also show some of the clues from the books. So now I'm going to go on to the internet and show some of the clues that Forrest has given over the years and explain how I think those clues refer to this area that I found. Somewhere in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe. Not in Idaho or Utah. I believe the treasure was in Colorado. Not in Canada. Above 5,000 feet and below 10,200 feet. The very top of the blaze, the rock blaze, is 10,000 feet. I believe that somebody, either walking beneath the blaze or above the blaze, was within 200 feet of the treasure. And I believe that the 10,200 feet refers to the 200 feet away from the treasure that one searcher or some of the searchers have been. And I believe I've been within less feet than 200 feet. And That's one of the reasons that this treasure has been very hard for searchers to find, is because if it's at or near 10,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe, there's only a few months of every year that you safely have access to look. And much of the area is covered with snow, ice throughout the winter, and has a lot of thunderstorms and violent monsoons in the fall months, in August and September. And so the treasure is wet much of the year and very difficult to get to, and on some years almost impossible. You have high water crossings, deep snow, and the high elevation. Not associated with a man-made structure. Not associated with a dam. More than 8.25 miles north of Santa Fe. And I believe that the 8.25 clue is the too far to walk. And that 8.25 miles is actually the exact distance from Pagosa Springs to the East Fork of the San Juan River, the turnoff that will take you below the home of Brown and up to Elwood. It is 8.25 miles from Pagosa Springs to the East Fork of the San Juan River turnoff, where you start your journey up the mountain towards the treasure. Not in a graveyard. Fenn was able to walk to the spot twice, where he parked his sedan, made 2 trips in an afternoon, and returned home before Peggy knew he was gone. Indeed, this location, if you took a 4-wheel drive Jeep or a 4-wheeler, you could get up to the area, park either at Elwood Creek or Crayton Creek, and cross the creek, carry the treasure up to below or above or near the blaze, and deposit it, make 2 trips, and get back to the vehicle and get back to Santa Fe all before evening supper time. That's all been verified. We've done the math, we've been there, we've made the trip. Okay, here's some additional hints and clues that Fenn's given or talked about in his interviews. He says it's not at the top of the mountain, but it might be close. Well, this blaze is not at the top of the mountain, but it's close. It's not in a cemetery, but it would have been his final resting place. It's not a mine shaft. The dam is not where warm waters halt. The treasure weighs over 40 pounds. There is no man-made trail in close proximity to where he hid the treasure. And indeed, there's an old mining road that goes below the blaze, but within 500 feet or 200 feet from the treasure from that road, that access or that trail, or Crayton Creek, there's no man-made trails. You're all on foot in the woods or over rocks and up steep slopes. Somewhere in the map that's included in Too Far to Walk, there's a clue. In a minute I'm going to show you what that clue is, and it has to do with the omegas. The blaze is very close to the chest. Indeed, the chest could be in the blaze, to the side of the blaze, above the blaze, below the blaze, within 200 feet of the blaze, within 500 feet of the blaze, or it could be part of the blaze. And because it's a vast area of about 20 acres with trees and rocks and stumps and woods and hills and mountains and streams, waterfalls, that entire area is a nightmare of possible hiding places for the treasure. Most of the clues refer to places that have been around for a long time. The treasure chest is near pine trees, sagebrush, and wildlife. The treasure would be very hard to retrieve in the wintertime, but not impossible. I'm just paraphrasing. Forrest planned to die the same spot where there was a treasure, so it's also a place where you could hang out, where you could gasp your last breath. It has to be big enough for Forrest to crawl into or up to. He says, I warned the path would not be direct for those who had no certainty of the location beforehand, but sure before the one that did. I've always been sure of the general location, just not the final resting place of the treasure. The first clue is the starting point. The rest leads only a short distance away from it. I cannot imagine anyone finding the treasure without first identifying the starting point. Indeed, from Pagosa Springs to the Forrest Fenn treasure is under 15 miles. Well, maybe closer to 20, under 20 miles. The treasure site is not at risk of being discovered accidentally, and I'm paraphrasing. Indeed, this entire area where I believe the treasure was hidden is not a place that anybody would go unless they were absolutely lost or crazy. It's steep, rocky, there's a lot of rocks to scramble over, there's a lot of underbrush. You got to be careful to not hurt your ankles or your knees or your legs walking in this area. And it's not a place that even would appeal to hunters or anybody else, because it's a rock pile and it's very steep, and the blaze is more of a visual thing than anything else. It's a large rocky formation on a hillside. The distance from the parking spot to the treasure is less than a few miles. And that fits very well. If you get within 12 feet of the treasure, you could see the treasure. And there's a lot of places in this area that if you were standing 12 feet away from the treasure and you were looking in the right spot, I believe you would see it. But you would have to be looking for a particular feature, and I believe that feature could possibly be either down in the rocks or up in a tree. I want to show you a clue from Too Far to Walk. I want to show you the clue that I believe is in the map. I do want to point out a clue here. Here's some rabbits, a rabbit that he's got in his pictures. I believe that's also a clue. He talks about Harvey, his friend Harvey, and he was a movie star. He was in a few movies. Subsequently, there was a movie about called Harvey, and the actor in the movie's name was Elwood. And Elwood was his friend, his best friend, or his friend in the movie was an imaginary rabbit. And Forrest said at one time, he said, "Don't go down the rabbit hole." I believe that the rabbit hole in this is the mine, is one of the mines. And above the mine, closely above the mine, you can see on Google Earth a large, cartoonish rabbit in the rocks and in the trees of Harvey the rabbit. It looks like a cartoon rabbit that is running, and below the cartoon rabbit in the actual geological formation is the mine, which I believe is the rabbit hole. And Harvey, who was Elwood in the movie, is a clue, and the imaginary rabbit, don't go down the rabbit hole, is the mine, and the rabbit is in the geological formation, which can be seen from Google Earth, which is just across to the south of the blaze. Now, in the book, he shows in the map, there's a couple of omegas. We know alpha is the beginning in the Greek and omega is the end. And here he has two omegas. What could two omegas mean? Well, the two omegas are in the map. There's actually one omega on the map, which is the letter U, and omega is the letter U upside down. The letter U upside down is right near the border of New Mexico. If you follow the east fork of the San Juan, you follow the San Juan River up, you will see the U, very similar to an omega. The U in the San Juan, J-U-A-N, the U is actually in the exact location of where the treasure, the general area of where the treasure was hidden. It's also an omega. That is the clue on the map, is the U in San Juan is the omega. Shows the general location of the treasure. The second omega is actually the map itself. The map itself, backwards, if you were to take a photocopy of this map and transfer it to the other side and flip it around, this map is the exact shape of the blaze. The blaze is the map backwards. The omega is the U in San Juan upside down. There's two clues in. It's also possible, but I have not been able to prove it, that the map backwards is the blaze, and that the omega, the U in San Juan, is the location in the blaze, in the rocks, where the treasure is at. If that's the case, I've either not been able to find it, my metal detector was not able to get to it, or somebody found it before I did. Or it's too deep for my metal detector and I somehow missed it. Let me say that again. The U in San Juan is one of the omegas, upside down. The other omega is the map backwards. It's also possible that the map backwards, using this as the blaze, which is a map backwards, if you follow this U, that is also the location of the treasure, is where the U is in the map backwards. I don't know if I'm making that clear. But this blaze is a large boulder pile. It's possible that the map backwards is the blaze, and that by following the U in San Juan into the boulder pile towards the bottom of it, below the blaze, is the location of the treasure. But once again, it's a vast boulder field full of refrigerator, doghouse, to basketball-sized rocks, covered with multicolors of green and gray and brown and black and yellow and orange lichen. It's like a giant Where's Waldo puzzle. That, I believe, is the clue in the map. And the meaning of the omegas is the U in San Juan upside down and the map backwards. In my research and searching for the Forrest Fenn treasure, I never put too much stock in any of the things that the other searchers said or did. They were always felt like they were so crazy and off base and lost and delusional, and I always couldn't even find the first clue that I went there mostly for entertainment, but obviously, you know, there's always that one clue or somebody just thinks of something or hears something, and so I always looked and was entertained by some of these different sites. One of them, I'm not going to mention any of them and give them any credibility, but one of the ones I really got a kick out was old Bill Gorman. He's quite a character, and he's been a dedicated fan searcher for a long time, and whenever I needed some entertainment, I'd go to his sites. But I know that one of the clues that somebody's talked about is a mammoth, and indeed one of the clues that as I was traveling from Durango to Pagosa Springs to begin my search one time, I noticed on the right-hand side of the road on my way out of Pedra, which is just outside of Durango, a mammoth carved out of a large tree stump, natural tree stump, right on the side of the road on the way to Pagosa Springs. So I don't know if that's a clue or not, but it's interesting. If anybody else has ever noticed that mammoth or has a photo of it, I might have a photo I can find and post in this video. If I get one, I'll post it. Anyway, if anybody else has seen that mammoth, post a picture or let me know. Anyway, here's Bill Gorman with on the Codex and Forrest Fenn's treasure, and I get a kick out of some of the things he did. But anyway, every clue that Forrest gave, in person, in the news media, the elevation, take a flashlight, bring a sack lunch, the distance that he walked and went, the time frames, the too far to walk clues, all fit the East Fork of the San Juan area and the old town area of Elwood. Or I said Pedra, Bayfield, the town of Bayfield. Here's Bayfield. Here's 506 coming through, and about right here by Kenner Drive on the right hand side of the highway is where the mammoth carving is, right on the side of the road right there. So that's, you know, 40 or 50, 60 miles from Pagosa Springs. So now we're going to go to Pagosa. Oh, there's Pedra. Okay, so Bayfield, Pedra, and then Pagosa Springs. Okay, so here we are at Pagosa Springs. And I'm going to show you, we're going to look at the too far to walk clue. I'm going to put a pin right here. Okay. I'm going to go to the tools. I'm going to get a ruler. We're going to go from feet to, let's go to miles. Slide that out of the way. Let's zoom down. From, here's Pagosa. Let's go, this is just a rough guesstimate. We're going to go here. That's 9.28 miles. Well, that's from the center of Pagosa. Let's go from the town limits of Pagosa there. I'm not really sure if it's the sign. I know it's past Highway 84 that leads you to, it's past Highway 84 that leads you to Santa Fe. I believe it's somewhere like right here. Let's go to the turnoff, and I know I'm just skipping through here because that's 8.58 miles. So he gives a clue of 8.25 miles, and it's probably further than that if you follow the road, but I'm not exactly sure where the town boundary of Pagosa Springs starts. Okay, so this is U.S. Forest Road, U.S. Forest Road 667. It's the east fork of the San Juan River. The San Juan River goes up the mountain. It splits. Crater Creek is on the right. Elwood Creek is on the left. Where these two creeks come together, that's the headwaters of the east fork of the San Juan. That is the location right there where those two rivers come together, where I believe Forrest hid his treasure within a few yards or hundreds of yards from that area. Now, if we go up here, we have, there's one water crossing, two water crossings. We go up through the private property. It's three water crossings, four water crossings. Now when we get up here, I'm going to turn the map, make it a little easier for you. Maybe you can see the rabbit. Here's old Elwood, there's the rabbit. Here's the blaze, which is the map backwards. This right here is the path of Crater Creek as it comes down the mountain. It meets Elwood Creek coming down, and where they come together right here becomes the east fork of the San Juan. That is the location where those two creeks come together and form the headwaters of the San Juan. That is the upside down omega on the map, which is the U in the word San Juan, J-U-A-N. The U is precisely at the junction between this river and that river right where the hand is. That is the clue on the map. If you turn the map backwards, it becomes the blaze. Here's the blaze. There's the blaze right there. That's the map backwards. That's the old blaze. There's two on a tree. That would mean go right, depending on you're coming or going. Go right or go left. There's Forest Rainbow. You've got red in the rocks. You've got blue, green, yellow, more dark blue. Over here you've got your orange, your yellow, your blues fading back to the blues, and then a little more rainbow here. This is Forrest Fenn's end of his rainbow. That's the blaze. Here you can see Elwood the rabbit. Here's Elwood's ears. Here's his head. There's his mouth. There's one arm here. Here's his leg up here. Here's his other arm down here. That's Elwood pointing down. Right here where I've got my pin is the old Elwood, one of the entrances to the old Elwood mine. That is the rabbit hole. Do not go into the old mine. Don't go into the rabbit hole. There's Elwood the rabbit. He starred in the movie. His friend starred in the movie. His name in the movie was Elwood. He had an imaginary rabbit friend. That's the rabbit. That's the famous rabbit of all the clues in Forrest mentioning the rabbit. There's the rabbit hole. This is the blaze, one of the blazes, the rock blaze. The other blaze is hard to see, but it's right here. You can see this big area right here I'm circling. This is an old forest fire. That's a big old blaze right there. When you get on the ground in that area, you can see the charred stumps, the fallen trees, the cracked rocks. You can see the signs of a huge forest fire right there. That's the blaze in the forest blaze. This is the blaze on the hillside. The blaze in the tree is either at the location of the treasure, which I believe to be right there where my hand is, in that tree right there. That was the location I was headed to tomorrow with my father. I believe there's an old eagle's nest or owl's nest or something in that tree where Forrest put the treasure. And he climbed up in there one time and got, this is the most spectacular view. I'm going to post photos of the view from on top of the blaze. There's old mines around here. This is an old mining district. The color of the rocks shows that this is an old mining area. There are many minerals. There's iron, gold, silver. I have found lead, indicators of lead and copper, as well as mercury. I picked up some very nice samples of crystals with, you could see beads of liquid mercury in the rocks. Cinnabar. I have several really nice specimens of cinnabar that I took from this area. Picked up. So there's the blaze. I've been all over. I've looked. This is a Where's Waldo maze of rocks. 10 acres of boulder, a boulder field of 10 acres where he could have put the treasure anywhere from this far to this far down in the rocks in plain sight. You would never see it without a flashlight or without looking straight down. This area right here below the mine, below the rabbit hole, is what I term the fairy forest, the kids forest, or the gnome forest, whatever you want to call it. It's an area where there's many blown down rocks, young trees coming up, rocks and hidey holes and down logs, and there's hundreds and hundreds of hiding places right here. I metal detected all this. I metal detected all this. Here's the blaze backwards. I'm going to show you a picture again. If we look at this shape, it's this shape. Let's get a better view here. This shape backwards is the blaze. If you go to the U in San Juan, it takes you right here. Right here. If you flip the map backwards and use this as the location of the treasure, it puts you right here in the blaze. I've been over that 100 times with my metal detector. Right in this area there is a spectacular view. And there's actually a nice place that you could climb down in there and rest, where Forrest could inter himself. Also a very good spot for where the treasure could be hidden. But I metal detected that area. There was actually evidence that somebody else had moved some rocks around in this area because the lichen, when you move rocks with lichen on them, the lichen fades or dies. And there's several rocks in here that the lichen, it was dead, and there was also a large white rock, not large, but a fist-sized rock of quartz placed right here. There was nothing else in the entire area except for that fist-sized piece of white quartz. I searched heavily in this area. I finally came to the conclusion that looking quickly down meant you were on top of the blaze somewhere. And that being wise and in the wood may have been reference to an owl or an owl's nest or something like that. Right in this general area, there's a large tree with some kind of a nest or something in it. And I didn't go into it when I was there last. I wish I would have, but I was running out of time. The area was fairly dangerous. It looked fairly dangerous to get to. In the back of my head, I was thinking, don't go where an 80-year-old man wouldn't go. But like I said, Forrest isn't your average 80-year-old man. So it's possible that that's where it was found, or that's, if this latest discovery is a hoax, it's possible that it's still there. That's where I'm headed next. Now right up here, there's a very spectacular cliff place where you can get down in the rocks and have amazing view. All this is amazing view. And I'm going to post some pictures of the view. But to get an idea from Google Earth, let's rotate this around and look at the view. You're looking up here at where Crater Creek comes out over here. There's a glacier right here. If you look down the valley, this is down towards the private land. This is down toward Pagosa's over here. This is down towards the highway. You can look all the way down the valley. There's waterfalls and streams and cliffs. And you have a spectacular, spectacular view from anywhere on this blaze. Now let's get another view. There's a view of the rabbit, of Elwood, Harvey the rabbit, whatever you want to say. Right there's his ears, there's his mouth, there's his arms, there's his legs, there's his little tail, and he's got it, one arm's pointing down right there at the rabbit hole. Now there's Crater Creek coming down. There's lots of little waterfalls and springs and streams. There's another little spring coming off through this burn, old burn. There are many big waterfalls here on Elwood Creek. And I've been to some of them, but none of them are what I would term safe or easy to get to. I have a hard time believing Forrest would have hid the treasure here, considering what I feel about Forrest and my experience with the old medicine man burial, that I think Forrest would be up on a spectacular view. He said in his poem, "Tarry not with marble gaze, marble gaze. Don't stand there stupidly gazing off at the marvelous scenery. Take the chest and go in peace." Here's a few more interesting things about the area around where I believe Forrest Fenn's treasure was. Here's Pagosa Springs. Down here is Santa Fe. Here's what's called Treasure Mountain. This mountain is the mountain that was mentioned in the Louis L'Amour story. I believe it was Treasure Mountain. It's one of the Sackett books. And they mentioned Treasure Mountain. This is the general location of a lost treasure. I believe it was by the French. So this is some of the name markers around this area. There's Treasure Mountain. There's the Blaze. There's Montezuma's Peak. Long Trek Mountain. Summit Peak. This is Lookout Mountain. That's Cropsey Mountain. Telluride Mountain. Handkerchief Mesa. Yeah, we're all crying today. And Fox Mountain. So all these mountains around here, if you think about if names mean anything to Forrest Fenn, there's a lot of irony in this location in the names of the area. Treasure Mountain being a big one, Montezuma's Peak, the San Juan River is an outstanding fishery, fly fishery. It's a beautiful river, and it's very, very remote, difficult to get to, rugged, high water crossings, old treasure locations, and all the clues culminate right in that location. I also wanted to mention the elevation. Forrest said that the treasure was located above 5,000 feet and below 10,200 feet. Ironically, or coincidentally, Why did he say 10,200 feet? What is the clue in 10,200 feet? Well, I believe the top of the blaze, if you look at the elevation, 10,000, I got 10,002 feet. 10,002 feet at the top of the blaze. If somebody walked across the top of the blaze, they would have been within 200 feet. That could be the clue. You can't walk 10,000 feet because it's much too rugged. You're probably not going to even walk 10,050 or 10,100. The easiest place to walk is the ridge, which runs about, you got it, about 10,200 feet above the blaze. Now, if the treasure was located right here, above this interesting feature on the blaze, which looks like a rainbow, coincidentally, let's look at the tools and the distances. Instead of miles, we're going to go to feet. Since Forrest said that the treasure, that he knew people had been within 500 feet and 200 feet of the treasure from the mine, which is obviously a place that somebody would have mentioned that Forrest would know precisely where it was in relation to the treasure, to the blaze is 500 feet, right on the money. To the mine, from the mine to the top of the blaze is 500 feet, right on the money. So if somebody went to this mine and the treasure was within 500 feet of this area, he would have known they were within 500 feet of the treasure. If the treasure is right here somewhere, the easiest walking location, if you're walking underneath the blaze, is right through this cut, right below the blaze. That says 219 feet, but you can easily get on Google Earth, there's 180 feet. Anyway, this cut is approximately 200 feet from the top of this blaze. If the treasure is in the map backwards, the U of San Juan, it's somewhere in this area. That puts us within 200 feet of the mine. So if the treasure was here and somebody went to the mine, Forrest would know that they were within 200 feet of the mine, or within 200 feet of the treasure. Below this location, where I thought the treasure was located, we have this old mining road that runs up through here to some of these other mine sites. This mining road, if you were traveling on this old mining road, which is a popular ATV four-wheel drive Jeep road, used to be before all the trees fell down, that says 438 feet. You would have been within 500 feet. So anybody that drove this road and told Forrest about it, he possibly could have, if the treasure's in one of these lower locations, if anybody drove this road, they would have been within 500 feet of the treasure on that road. And 200 feet from the mine, which is another location that people would have mentioned to Forrest. I went to the old mine. Don't go in the rabbit hole. So there's two locations. That is the map backwards, where the U in San Juan marks the spot on the actual map. That is my second choice location, is actually 200 feet from the easiest walking below, 200 feet from the easiest walking above, 500 feet from the mine. Those are the two areas that I focused my search on and have not been able to turn up anything. But I believe there's a very good possibility the treasure was found here or somewhere in here. Now, an interesting thing I want to do in Google Earth is I want to go to the time, different times. In one of these, you can actually see there's the blaze, a little different. Let's rotate it just a little bit. Okay, now we can see the road that leads to the mine. Here's the main road coming down here. Here's the cutoff road that comes up into a turnaround spot right here. And there's the mine right there. So using this Google Earth in the times, you can get different views of what I believe is Forrest Fenn's rainbow, the end of the rainbow that leads to his treasure. This is the blaze. This whole thing is the blaze, one of the blazes. The final blaze is either a tree on the rocks. Maybe it's carved on the backside of a rock. I don't know, but I have not found the final blaze, which I believe is, I now am thinking maybe in a tree in a nest. And I think there's some nest, a large nest in the tree up here that I was going to go to, and now delayed my trip to see if this Forrest Fenn finding the treasure is a reality. There's another plain picture of the blaze. It's got a little shadow on it, but you can see some of the trees a little better. You can kind of see there's a large tree, dead tree right here that has some, I believe is the nest. An owl or an eagle's nest. You can see that this is 9/29, so 2013, so even in August, the warmest month of the year, look at these patches of snow in here. Some of this is a glacier, some of this never melts. There's Crater Lake. There's the old Elwood Pass right down here at this junction. Is the tree with the blaze carved into it that says Elwood Pass. There's the road, goes across here and up this canyon. This road comes over. It's actually blocked off right here. The Forest Service blocked it off. From here you have to hike in here to the area. You can come up this way and hike down and across. There's a lot of dead downfall across the old road, the old mining road in here now. So you have to hike either in here to there or from here. Let's look at the distance again. Okay, we're in feet. Let's go miles. He said less than a few miles. Okay, as a crow flies, you're 0.62 miles. So if you multiply, and obviously it's going to be more, you've got jogs and turns. We could actually do a path. Path, and let's go boing, 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 across the old road, up here, the old trail comes in right there. That's 0.85 miles, so a mile and 6 there and back to that area. So if you went up further or a little further anywhere in there, you're looking at a mile and 3/4 at the most. So a mile and 3/4, you're looking at 2.5 miles, 2 3/4 miles. I would say it's under 2.5 miles there and back. Round trip, he could have parked there and made that round trip, or let's clear this. Let's do another one. Could have driven his Jeep or four-wheeler over here, parked here, come down this old mining road, across the creek, That's 0.71 miles. So their round trip is 1.42 miles. All very easily doable in an afternoon. You're going to have to, if you park here and hike in, you're going to be crossing Crater Creek and you're going to get wet. If you park here, you're going to be crossing Elwood Creek and getting wet. Either way, you're going to be cold. Now, if you're anywhere in here, if you're down here, you need to be watching your footing and careful, but it's safe, very safe. Up here, I would say you need to be brave. If you're brave, you will come up here. It's steep, it's a hard climb. An 80-year-old man can do it. How do I know? Because my dad was 82 years old when he went with me the last trip. And my dad is in pretty good shape, but he has diabetes. He has to watch his sugar and be careful, and he gets weak. And my dad was tired and he was weak, but he made the trip with me. One chapter that really caught my attention in Too Far to Walk, I had a brain fart there, is chapter 37, Treasures Galore. And I believe that this is the description of the area that Forrest Fenn left his treasure. If you'll read that chapter carefully, he has an argument with a Tribune man over how many trees it takes to publish the newspaper. And then he waxes poetic, speaking to himself and to us. I want to read a few of the things here it says on page 198. I think some of these things are clues. Towards the end of the argument, the newsman says, "You must live in a cave." I believe there is a cave there. I crossed my legs and told him that his argument reminded me of the lady at the opera who gets stabbed, but instead of bleeding, she sings an aria. I guess he wasn't laughing, I went on, and finally lost to the big city hustle, and a few last words that I didn't have time to look up. But there was a point to all of this madness. Now this is where he's telling you there's a clue, there's a point to this madness. We take our undomesticated countryside too much for granted. The mountains are not sleeping, they are alive with the healing smells of pine needles and pinion pollen and juniper berries. The shades of fall are yellow with blooming chassimia shrubbery, and the golden glow of rabbit brush can be intoxicating. The Indian paintbrushes are clustering around for little reason other than to display nature's ruby flush of color. And he's got a picture of the mountain here, which I believe is the East Fork of the San Juan down low looking up the canyon. Those accounts continue to stir me and are too important to let languish. But I've had my turn and am rich with experiences that nature offers. For hours at a time I've hiked through a forest looking for arrowheads and other signs of prior life. The gentle nudging of the wind provides an ambience that is almost talismanic to me, and I love the privacy and stillness. When a sound breaks the calm of a canyon, I know something is important and I quickly turn. Maybe it's a squirrel whose tail is beating a rapid cadence that lets all creatures know that he's aroused by visible danger. He doesn't want to be mean, but I think he wants to look like he could be. Perhaps a tepid black bear has topped a hill, or an unreasonable barn owl is on the hunt. So these are things that I believe are in the area. Wildflowers, aspens, a canyon, squirrels, a black bear, owls. Sitting quietly can bring many smiling rewards, perhaps an aptly named least chipmunk, whose size might make you think that he's one of nature's afterthoughts, will scamper into view and scurry around hiding berries and nuts for winter. When the snow falls deeply, he'll go into a state of torpor but will not hibernate. Isn't that interesting? There's so much, so much to learn. I'm going to skip the next paragraph because I don't know what it means or if it means anything. Well, yeah, sure. But the rewards of trapezing through the hills and canyon bottoms are a winner-take-all proof of personal fulfillment for me. If some of my friends think I'm wrong to be a distant dreamer, vaguely disinterested in many of life's modern habits, they could be correct. But wrong is one of those concepts that depends on witnesses. And that's why I'm always right when I'm alone in the mountains. I'll happily share my national forest with you, but please try to stay at least 20 miles away. And isn't it interesting that 20 miles away, exactly 20 miles from Pagosa Springs to the Blaze, exactly 20 miles. This is his treasures galore. This is his thesis on the treasure, all these things that are around it, and he leaves us with this clue. He leaves us with a bunch of little clues about the animals and the scenery and a picture of the area. And then he says, I'll happily share my national forest. So he's telling you it's in the national forest, but please stay at least 20 miles away. Please stay in Pagosa Springs and don't go up to where he put the treasure. Well, I've rambled on here for probably too long now, and I'm just going to wrap this up. I guess there's a couple of things I want to comment on. I think there's a good possibility that the Forrest Fenn treasure was found in September, August or September, probably September of 2019. It's possible it was found this year, but I would be surprised if it was. If the location that I've discussed here today is the correct location where the treasure was found, then it's still quite early to access that area. The road's been in terrible shape the last few years. There's been a lot of blowdown, a lot of washed out river crossings. The elevation is high. There's still going to be snow at 10,000 feet. And so that's just my 2 cents. I have other reasons for believing that it was possibly found in September of 2019. One of the reasons is that for several years, the last few years, I have had trail cameras, several trail cameras guarding the area, so that anybody coming into that area is not going to know that they were on trail camera. Nobody could get into that area without being on trail camera, and I need to review, find out the approximate time, and try to review and figure out if one of those individuals that are on the trail camera were the finder, if this has happened. There's one concern that I do have. Last year, my last trip in there was mid-September, and I found a camp on the ridge on the top of the Blaze that was absolutely atrocious. Somebody had hiked in probably 50 pounds of food, cigarettes, beer, whiskey, candy, all kinds of camping gear, and had camped right at 10,000 feet right on the ridge. Now, because of the time of year in September, the archery, elk, and deer hunts are going on in Colorado. So it is possible that an archery deer hunter or elk hunter left that camp up there. But the camp there were several valuable things left in the camp that were it was just as if somebody had made a camp there and then suddenly just left everything there and disappeared. And to me, that was troubling, because at the time I was searching, and to me it gave a possible indication that somebody had gone up there, gone through a lot of work to get up there, had a good idea the treasure might be there, put in a camp to spend a week, possibly found the treasure, and in their excitement, haste, whatever, just abandoned everything, possibly because if you have a 42-pound box, 50 pounds of groceries and equipment to get out of there, you may, some unscrupulous person may have just left all their garbage and their camp and everything right up in that beautiful location. And if that was the case, if that was the one who found it, and they did that, I hope that they will go back and clean that mess up. If I wouldn't have been so tired and been carrying my metal detector and my big heavy pack with all my gear in it, my bivouac gear and some food and water and everything that I needed in order to be able to stay anywhere, I would have carried it out. But that kind of thing really bothers me. I know it would be upsetting to Forrest if that was the actual person that discovered the treasure. If they left that mess up there, then I don't feel like that's in the spirit of Forrest Fenn or what he stands for or what this search has been all about. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope it was some unscrupulous hunter or something else. Maybe somebody got injured and had to get out of there and left all their things. But I hope next time I go back there that all those things are gone or cleaned up. And if not, I have intents to try to get all that stuff out of there. I'll hike in there light and be prepared to take it out. But it was quite a mess. I'll show pictures of that in my videos. So anyway, thanks very much. Please comment and let me know what you think, and hopefully we'll find out for certain. Hopefully the person doesn't remain anonymous and leave the location anonymous, and Fenn leaves it anonymous. That would be, it would be frustrating. It would not clear Fenn from possible a lot of people have accused him of not hiding the treasure or of hiding it and going back and getting it, and if we never find any of those details out, then that would certainly, in some people's minds, shine a bad light on Fenn, calling off the treasure hunt without any evidence that the treasure was found, which would point to the fact that was it ever hidden in the first place. I believe it was. It probably was found. But if it was found, I believe that this location that I've revealed and the details of it are quite possibly the area that the treasure was located. Thank you.